Chapter 12, Sculpted and Refined. But the seed in the good soil, these are the ones who have heard the word in an honest and good heart, and hold it fast and bear fruit with perseverance. Luke 8:15, one day at a time. The blaring PA system pierced the pre-dawn stillness. First call, first call. Rise and shine, jellies. Day 4 is one step closer to glory. Wade jarred from a fitful slumber. He groaned, every muscle in his body aching from the previous day's exertions. Beside him, Jay was already up and dressed, a serene expression on his face as he quietly prayed and closed his Bible. "Come on, brother. Time to get moving," Jay said, giving Wade a gentle nudge. "We don't want to be late for PT." Dragging himself out of his rack, Wade quickly hit the latrine for personal hygiene, dressed, and in 10 minutes followed Jay and the other jellies to the sprawling physical training fields. The morning chill cut through his thin workout gear, causing goosebumps to rise on his skin. As the company formed up, the menacing figure of Drop Sergeant Schwartz emerged from the shadows, muscles looking like they were going to burst through his PTs. His face twitched, having consumed 5 cups of coffee before the recruits even woke up. He mounted the PT platform and towered over the troopers. "Listen up, jellies!" Schwartz's booming voice carried across the field. "For the last 3 days, we've been taking it easy on you. Today, we start the real artwork so I can turn your pathetic bodies into my sadistic little masterpieces. I will sculpt you into lean, mean, fighting machines, or I will chisel you into a million pieces and ship you home in a crate of shards. The choice is yours." With that ominous declaration, the brutal regimen began. If the punishing calisthenics and endless runs weren't enough, Sergeant Schwartz seemed to take a perverse delight in devising new and innovative ways to torment the recruits' bodies. One particularly dreaded ritual was log PT, a sadistic series of exercises using massive logs similar to those used by Navy SEALs and recon in the ancient days. The logs themselves were ungainly behemoths, rough-surfaced plasticrete easily 20 feet long and over a foot in diameter. Just lifting one was an exercise in sheer muscle and willpower, blistering the neck, shoulders, and hands as teams of 6 recruits for each log strained to perform various exercises, testing strength and teamwork. "Listen up, jellies," Schwartz would bellow, his voice carrying across the field. "Today, you get to make friends with an old friend of mine, the log. Maybe she'll teach you grapes a thing or two about suffering." With that cheerful introduction, the nightmarish gauntlet would begin. Shoulder presses, overhead lifts, lunges, squats. Each excruciating repetition forced the recruits to engage every fiber of their being, pushing their muscles far beyond the limits of what they thought possible. Sweat poured from their bodies in streams, mixing with the grime and mud that caked their skin. Veins bulged from reddened foreheads and trembling arms as they struggled to maintain their grip on the unyielding logs. Spines screamed in protest, every vertebra feeling like it might snap under the immense strain. Some recruits failed to pull their weight, forcing others to shoulder more than their fair share. Team dynamics disintegrated into outbursts of anger and moans of agony. And always Schwartz prowled among them, his raptor gaze zeroing in on any hint of weakness, any faltering in their Herculean exertions. "What's the matter, Kovac? The log too heavy for your scrawny chicken arms? Maybe we should get you a nice little twig to play with instead." Wade forced a smile and shouted, "Bring it on, Drop Sergeant!" The sergeant looked at him half amused and half revengeful. Schwartz would test Wade's arrogance. By the time the torturous session finally ended, even the strongest recruits were reduced to shuddering, quivering wrecks, their bodies utterly depleted after battling the merciless logs. As they stood in formation, chests heaving, barely able to maintain the position of attention, Schwartz's mocking laughter would ring out over the field, the sweet music that signaled the end of another successful day in the forging of warriors. The days quickly blurred into a relentless cycle of physical torture. Before the first rays of dawn had crested the horizon, Wade and Jay found themselves drenched in sweat, muscles burning from endless repetitions of push-ups, sit-ups, and pull-ups. Their legs felt like lead weights as they pounded out mile after grueling mile, lugging enormous rucksacks on their backs. Obstacle courses designed by sadists pushed them to their limits, forcing them to crawl through mud pits, scale towering walls, and haul their bodies over vertigo-inducing rope bridges. More than once, Wade found himself retching into the dirt, his body rebelling against the inhuman demands placed upon it, and Sergeant Schwartz's ever-present piercing gaze bored into them, his harsh insults and unforgiving punishments driving them ever harder. "Is that all you've got, Jellies? My grandma could run circles around you. Pathetic, just pathetic." At night, Wade would shuffle into the mess hall, utterly spent, barely able to muster the energy to shovel food into his mouth. After chow, he headed straight for his barracks and collapsed onto his rack. Before drifting into a dreamless slumber, his mind whirled with thoughts of doubt. How much longer could he endure this agonizing pace? He wondered how in the world Alex and Briggs hit the streets every night. "This has got to let up," he thought to himself. He managed a short prayer before he drifted off to sleep. "Thanks for helping me survive another day, Lord. Help me make it through tomorrow." Rock steady. Wade had initially maintained his usual bravado, convinced that his experiences on Carthus 7 had more than prepared him for the rigors of DS. However, as the days ground on, his hubris steadily eroded, replaced by a growing sense of dread and self-doubt. Worse still, Sergeant Schwartz seemed to take a perverse delight in singling Wade out, heaping scathing criticism and extra punishment upon him at every opportunity. The man's sheer presence was enough to send tendrils of fear snaking through Wade's gut. While Wade floundered, consumed by self-doubt and the ever-present specter of failure, Jay remained a pillar of strength and composure. Though the grueling regimen pushed him to his physical limits, the sailor's unwavering faith and ironclad discipline allowed him to weather the storm with a quiet fortitude that left Wade in awe. Each morning, Jay would rise before reveille, his voice a gentle murmur, as he recited passages from his worn Bible. No matter how exhausted he was, he never compromised on his daily devotions, finding solace and strength in his spiritual practices. And when the torturous training sessions threatened to break their spirits, it was Jay who would offer a reassuring smile and a word of encouragement, reminding them of the higher purpose that drove them forward. "Stay strong, brothers," he would say, his eyes shining with conviction. "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me." That's in the Bible, men. Grab hold and believe. Watching Jay's unwavering resolve and witness to the other recruits, Wade couldn't help but feel humbled and inspired. Here was a man who embodied the true essence of a warrior, not through brute force or bravado, but through his faith in God and an indomitable spirit that refused to yield, no matter the adversity. The Quitter's Inquisition. From the moment Sergeant Schwartz had laid eyes on Wade, the seasoned drop instructor had recognized the telltale signs of overconfidence and hubris on the outside, but fear and doubts lurking on the inside. The very traits that often proved an individual's undoing in the crucible of Ranger training. Schwartz was a Ranger on assignment to DIS as a liaison and a sort of quality control for the regiment. He had seen it countless times before. Cocky young recruits who strutted in, acting 10 feet tall and bulletproof, but their core was plagued with the stuff that got them and those around them killed when plasma started flying. His job was to identify these weak links, swiftly and mercilessly disabuse them of their delusions, and see if they were still redeemable. And he took a perverse pleasure in breaking such individuals down, shattering their egos, and remolding them into the humble, disciplined warriors they needed to become, or sending them packing to a regular Marine unit. With Wade, Schwartz sensed a prime opportunity for such a transformation. The young Marine's swagger and nonchalant attitude grated on the sergeant's nerves. He saw through the facade, and he made it his personal mission to wipe that insufferable smirk off Wade's face. One morning, Sergeant Schwartz mounted the stand and bellowed, "Who wants to quit?" The recruits stood paralyzed at parade rest, not daring to give in after making it this far. Schwartz scanned the formation for any sign of weakness. Then he asked with a growl, "Who here quit high school? Raise your hand." Wade shot his hand in the air as an automatic response to commands, as he had been trained, before realizing the agenda behind the question. As he surmised the situation, he thought, Surely there are several of us who joined early, but he was the only one out of 100 who had raised his hand. Schwartz leaned over the PT stand precariously, balancing on the edge to get as close to Wade as gravity would let him. Pointing at Wade with all 5 fingers tightly pressed together, forming a flat knife hand, he said, "You, Mr. Kovac, are a quitter. That's all you will ever amount to, a quitter. And I am the Marines' instrument of destiny to make sure you quit here too. You will not make it here or anywhere." At first, Wade was embarrassed, but then his red face turned another shade as rage took over. He thought of his dad, Lieutenant Venn, and now Schwartz. He would never quit. This just got personal, and he was determined to never quit anything in life again. He would prove Sergeant Schwartz wrong and show that he was not a weak washout. The incident became personal, and Wade channeled his rage and determination into his training, pushing himself to his limits and beyond. Seed and soils. As the grueling weeks ground on, Wade found himself clinging to any glimmer of hope, any source of solace that could sustain him through the unrelenting trials. It was during these dark moments that the weekly chapel services became a beacon of light, offering a respite from the physical and mental anguish. The base chaplain, a kind-faced man with a gentle demeanor, would welcome the weary recruits into the sanctuary, his voice resonating with warmth and understanding. On this particular Sunday, as Wade and the others filed into the pews, the chaplain's gaze swept over them, his expression one of paternal concern. "My fellow warriors," he began, "I know the hardships you have endured these past weeks. The road ahead is fraught with challenges that will test the very limits of your strength and resolve." Almost on cue, the chaplain turned to catch a sliver of light streaking through the stained glass and reflecting off the silver dropship wings pinned above the row of ribbons on his chest. Like Chaplain Bronson, he had seen his share of war and carnage. Wade felt warmth rising in his chest as he admired the chaplain for his camaraderie of suffering. He was indeed a fellow warrior. He paused, allowing his words to sink in before continuing. "Today I would like to share with you the parable of the sower, as recounted in the Gospel of Mark. For in this timeless story lies a profound truth that may offer you solace and guidance in the trials to come." With that, the chaplain launched into the familiar story, his rich baritone painting vivid pictures of the sower, casting his seeds upon different types of soil, the hard-packed path, the rocky ground, the thorny patch, and finally, the fertile earth. As the story unfolded, Wade found himself drawn in, his mind's eye conjuring images of the tiny seeds, some withering and dying, others struggling to take root, and a precious few flourishing and bearing fruit. The seed, the chaplain explained, represents the Word of God, the divine truth that nourishes our souls and points us to Jesus. And the different types of soil represent the various states of our hearts and minds, hardened by cynicism and doubt, rocky and shallow, choked by the thorns of worldly distractions, or fertile and receptive to the seeds of his word. Wade shifted in his seat, the chaplain's words striking a chord deep within him. He thought back to his moments of weakness, when the relentless hardships had threatened to break his spirit, and he had teetered on the edge of surrender. He thought back to boot camp and Mike's commitment to God. He reflected on how he, Alex, and Briggs wanted to grow spiritually and follow in their fallen comrades' footsteps. "In the trials you face," the chaplain continued, his voice gentle yet carrying a note of steel, "it is all too easy to allow your hearts to become hardened, like the path or rocks where the seeds wither and die. The adversity you endure may tempt you to lose faith, to succumb to doubt and despair. It's too easy to be distracted by the allure of this world and forsake the one who gives true fulfillment." Wade felt the burn of shame. How quickly they had abandoned the faith for a few nights of unbridled debauchery. He wondered about his standing with God. Was he still in the darkness? Was he the first, second, or third soil? He was certain he was nowhere close to the good soil the chaplain was talking about. A hush fell over the chapel as the recruits hung on the chaplain's every word, their expressions ranging from rapt attention to furrowed brows of contemplation. "But mark my words, my brothers and sisters," the chaplain said, his gaze sweeping over the assembly. "If you can cultivate your hearts to be like the fertile soil, Nurturing your faith and perseverance, you will reap a bountiful harvest, a harvest of strength, courage, and joy in the midst of trials and tribulations. And to add to all that, you will become an inspiration for others to follow as you walk in the footsteps of Christ. As the sermon drew to a close, Wade felt a strange sense of peace and conviction, a desire to follow Jesus and strive to do better. The chaplain's words had struck a chord, reminding him of the deeper purpose, and he wanted to be that fourth soil. But how? Beside him, he could see Jay nodding in silent affirmation, his expression one of serene conviction. It was an expression that gave Wade comfort. He had a friend who knew the way. Jay could guide him. He just needed to ask for help. He resolved to have a serious discussion about the faith. He had to stay on track. As the congregation rose to their feet, joining in a closing hymn of praise and unity, Wade felt a newfound strength coursing through his weary muscles. He turned to Jay and said in a low voice, "We need to talk, bro." Jay smiled. "Sure thing, my fellow jelly," gently elbowing Wade in the gut. "Let's get some chow." The trials would continue, of that Wade was certain. But now questions for his brother in the faith were more pressing, and he would find the answers. The question. After shuffling through the cafeteria-style line and filling their trays with heaps of much-needed fuel for the grueling day ahead, Wade and Jay found a quiet corner to sit. As they settled in, Wade's mind raced with the questions that had been brewing since the chaplain's sermon. He turned to Jay, his expression a mix of curiosity and uncertainty. "Jay," Wade began, his voice low, "about those soils the chaplain was talking about. I know the seed on the path doesn't make it, but what about the rocky and thorny soils? Do they still get into heaven?" Jay paused mid-bite, his eyes widening in surprise. It was the first time Wade had seen his usually composed friend caught off guard. "Wade," Jay said carefully, setting down his fork, "think about what you're asking. Would you ask Sergeant Schwartz what the minimum standards are to pass? Or would you strive to excel?" Wade shifted uncomfortably, realizing the implications of his question. Jay continued, his voice gentle but firm. "We're not here to scrape by, brother. We're training to be Rangers, the best of the best. Shouldn't we approach our faith with the same dedication?" The words hit Wade like a splash of cold water. He'd been so focused on his own struggles and doubts that he'd lost sight of the bigger picture. Jay's analogy to their training drove the point home. This wasn't about meeting minimum requirements, but about striving for excellence in all aspects of life, including his walk with Jesus. "You're right," Wade admitted, a mix of shame and determination coloring his voice. "I should be aiming to be good soil, not just settling for less." Jay nodded, a small smile of encouragement on his face. "That's the Wade I know. Remember, brother, we're not just training our bodies here, we're refining our spirits too." As they resumed their meal, Wade thanked Jay for his honest but kind rebuke. He was growing in his faith. For the first time, his calling to serve God and humanity in the military started to make sense. He couldn't separate the two. He needed to pursue both with equal vigor.